Okay, so June 25th, 2009. Michael Jackson, age 50, died in Los Angeles.
Right. And the cause, determined later, was acute propofol intoxication.
Now, you probably remember the headlines, but this deep dive, well, it's about getting past that surface level.
Hmm.
We're not just revisiting it. We're really looking closely at, the whole sequence of events, the investigations, the impact.
Yeah.
You want to understand the key stuff without, like, getting lost in all the noise.
Yeah.
That's what we're aiming for here.
Absolutely. And it's really striking how much detail emerged afterwards. We're drawing on a pretty comprehensive overview, looking at everything from, what happened right away, the investigation, the legal side, the reaction.
All right.
It's a powerful case study, really, of how one event, especially with someone like Jackson, can just ripple outwards.
Exactly. So think of this as like your guide through the really critical points. We'll pull out what's most important so you get a clear picture of what happened, the official findings, and, well, why it still matters. So let's start right there. June 25th, 2009, the day he died.
Okay, so the timeline that day, it's pretty revealing when you piece it together. Jackson was in L.A. getting ready for those big This Is It comeback shows in London.
Yeah, the rehearsals.
Right. He'd rehearsed quite late, actually, June 24th, got home around 12:30 a.m., went to bed maybe an hour later.
And it's important context, isn't it? He had this long-standing issue with insomnia,
Definitely. A history of using medication to try and sleep.
which brings us straight to Conrad Murray, his personal doctor.
Murray was there specifically to help him sleep that night. He gave him some benzodiazepines first.
Like Valium, Ativan, those sorts of things. Diazepam, lorazepam.
Exactly. Midazolam, too.
Yeah.
Standard sedatives. But apparently they just weren't doing the job.
And this is where it gets really, really crucial. Jackson reportedly kept asking for propofol.
Yeah, the milk, as he apparently called it.
He'd used it before, supposedly for sleep.
Which, I mean, that's an immediate red flag right there. Propofol. It was a general anesthetic.
For surgery, yeah. Not a sleeping pill.
Precisely. Using it outside a hospital setting, especially for insomnia.
Hmm.
The risks are huge. Respiratory depression, cardiac arrest. It's well known.
So, okay, despite those risks, around 10:04 in the morning, Murray allegedly gives him 25 milligrams of propofol, diluted with lidocaine, another anesthetic.
Right. And according to Murray's own account, Jackson finally fell asleep after that. Murray then says he left the room for just like 2 minutes to use the bathroom.
Just two.
That's his claim. And when he came back, he says he found Jackson unresponsive, not breathing, very faint pulse.
Okay, so what Murray did next, this became, well, a huge point of focus later, right?
Absolutely critical and contentious. He said he started CPR, gave flumazenol, that's a drug, to reverse sedatives for about 10 minutes before calling anyone else for help. Staff in the house.
But there were issues with that CPR claim, weren't there? Reports suggested his technique was off.
Yeah, that was a disturbing detail.
Yeah.
Apparently he was doing it with one hand on Jackson's chest while Jackson was still on the bed.
Which isn't standard procedure. You need a firm surface, two hands.
Exactly. It immediately raises questions about how effective any of those efforts could have possibly been. It's one of several actions that, seem way off standard emergency protocols.
Definitely. And then there's the delay in calling 911, a significant delay.
Huge. Murray didn't make the call himself. He claimed there wasn't a landline. He didn't know the exact address.
But he had a cell phone.
Right. And records showed he made several private calls in that hour after finding Jackson unresponsive, instead of calling for emergency help right away.
That just seems baffling. So who did call 911 eventually?
It was security staff at the house. They finally called at 12:01 p.m.
Wow. So nearly an hour and a half after Murray supposedly found him.
Yeah. Paramedics were incredibly fast, arrived just 5 minutes later, 12:26 p.m.
But by then?
By then, they found Jackson in full cardiac arrest. Not breathing, no pulse. They started advanced life support, CPR, everything, and continued for 42 minutes right there in the house.
42 minutes. That's a long time. Then they transported him.
Yes. Arrived at Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center at 1:14 p.m. But despite everything the hospital team did, he was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m.
It's a tragic sequence of events. So the immediate next step was the autopsy, right? To figure out exactly why.
Correct. The preliminary autopsy, done the next day, didn't show obvious signs of trauma or, foul play in that sense.
But the toxicology reports, that's where the real answers lay.
Exactly. Those took time, but when they came back, well, they were definitive. On August 28, 2009, the L.A. County coroner made the official ruling. Michael Jackson's death was a homicide.
Homicide. And the cause?
Acute propofol intoxication. That was the primary cause. but significantly worsened by the presence of lorazepam, and also midazolam, diazepam, lidocaine, and ephedrine were found too. A cocktail, essentially, with propofol being the lethal element.
So it was the drugs. But what about his general health? There were always so many rumors.
Well, interestingly, the autopsy found that otherwise he was actually pretty healthy for a man his age. Strong heart, organs generally okay.
Really?
Yeah. His lung showed chronic inflammation, but that wasn't deemed a factor in his death, and his weight was within an acceptable range. So the underlying health wasn't the immediate issue.
So the focus really sharpened on the propofol and how he got it, which meant law enforcement got heavily involved.
Oh, absolutely. LAPD, the DEA. A major investigation kicked off. The DEA in particular was focused on tracking where these prescription drugs, especially the propofol, came from.
Was the investigation smooth? I seem to remember some criticisms.
There were some concerns raised, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly about the LAPD allowing family members into the house before the scene was completely secured.
Yeah.
Potential questions about evidence integrity.
Right, that could be an issue. And the focus inevitably turned towards doctors, didn't it?
It did. Very quickly.
Mm.
Any medical professional who had prescribed drugs to Jackson came under scrutiny. Reports mentioned at least 9 doctors being looked at, and police apparently wanted to talk to around 30 people total: doctors, nurses, pharmacists.
Which logically leads to the whole question of Jackson's alleged drug use history.
Exactly. And lots of reports surfaced about various things he was supposedly taking: propofol, of course, but also Xanax, alprazolam, antidepressants like sertraline, painkillers.
And they did find drugs at the house?
Yes, various prescription meds were found, including propofol. And significantly, some of it had fake labels or no labels at all.
Which suggests something wasn't right there.
Definitely irregular.
Yeah.
There was also an old police document from 2004 that surfaced, mentioning he allegedly took large amounts of alprazolam back then, but interestingly, that specific drug wasn't in his system when he died.
Did anyone else corroborate this pattern of seeking powerful drugs for sleep?
Yeah, there are testimonies.
Yeah.
A nurse practitioner, Sherilyn Lee, said Jackson asked her for propofol back in May, just a month before he died.
For sleep?
For sleep, yes. She refused. She noted he told her he'd used it before, but under medical monitoring.
And his dermatologist, Arnold Klein.
Klein also made statements saying Jackson had used an anesthesiologist to give him propofol for sleep during his history tour back in Germany.
So it seems like there's a pattern developing over time.
It certainly paints that picture. Another doctor, Eugene Aksonoff in Tokyo, who had treated Jackson, expressed concerns about his use of various drugs, even asking for stimulants sometimes. He also suspected maybe steroid use or skin treatments were contributing to some symptoms.
Were the family aware? Were there attempts to intervene?
Well, Janet Jackson claimed the family tried an intervention in 2007 because they were worried. But she said security turned them away. Other family members later disputed that specific account, though, so it's a bit unclear.
It's complex, but all this history, this context, it puts Conrad Murray's role right at the center.
Absolutely. He becomes the focal point. Remember, he was hired only in May 2009, specifically for the London concerts, as part of the deal with AEG Live, the promoters.
And initially, he didn't tell investigators about the propofol, right?
That's right. He initially omitted that crucial detail. As the investigation unfolded, though, and evidence mounted, suspicion grew. Law enforcement searched his office's storage units.
Leading eventually to charge him.
Yes. In February 2010, Conrad Murray was formally charged with involuntary manslaughter. He pleaded not guilty.
But the evidence must have been strong.
It appeared so. The trial, after some delays, finally started in September 2011. Huge media frenzy, obviously.
And the verdict?
November 2011, the jury found him guilty. Involuntary manslaughter.
What was the sentence?
He got the maximum possible sentence for that charge, which was 4 years in prison.
But he didn't serve the full 4 years.
No, he didn't. Due to California prison overcrowding rules and good behavior credits, he was paroled in October 2013 after serving just under 2 years.
Wow, okay. How did the family and the public react to all this? The death itself must have been devastating.
Immense reaction. The family put out a statement saying they were just speechless, devastated. LaToya Jackson was very vocal, believing he was, quote, murdered for his music catalog.
Strong words. And what about AEG Live, the concert promoters? They came under fire too, didn't they?
They did. The family raised serious questions about AEG's role, the pressure Jackson might have been under for the tour. Joe Jackson, Michael's father, filed a complaint against AEG, alleging they were basically practicing medicine without a license through their demands on Michael.
Did he sue Murray directly as well?
He filed a wrongful death suit against Murray, yes, but that was later dropped.
And the verdict against Murray. How did the family feel about that?
They publicly praised it, said justice had been served, but the feelings clearly remained very raw. Years later, 2017, Paris Jackson said she was absolutely convinced her father was murdered.
And they did pursue AEG legally, right?
Yes, the family, his mother Catherine and his children, filed a major wrongful death lawsuit against AG Live. The core argument was that AEG was negligent in hiring and supervising Murray.
What was the outcome of that?
It was a long trial, but ultimately the jury found in favor of AEG Live. They decided AEG wasn't liable.
So, a different outcome there. Beyond the legal battles, what was the broader aftermath? His estate, for instance.
Well, his will from 2002 named executors John Branca and John McClain and directed his assets into the Michael Jackson Family Trust.
And guardianship of the kids.
That went to his mother, Catherine Jackson, with Diana Ross named as the alternate if Catherine couldn't serve.
Was his estate valuable? There were always talks of debt.
There were debts, yes, but also huge assets. His net worth was estimated at over $230 million back in 2007. And posthumously, the estate has been incredibly lucrative. Just look at the sale of his share in the Sony ATV Music Publishing catalog that alone went for $750 million.
Wow, that's staggering. What about the immediate media reaction to his death?
Unprecedented. I mean, the internet practically broke. News sites, social media, they all slowed down or crashed from the sheer volume of traffic. Wikipedia saw almost 1 million people hit his biography page in just 1 hour.
Just incredible global interest. And grief, too, presumably.
Oh, a massive outpouring of public grief all over the world. Fans gathered at his L.A. home, the hospital, Neverland Ranch, his star on the Walk of Fame.
Tributes must have poured in.
From everyone. President Obama, Nelson Mandela, countless musicians paused concerts, recorded tribute songs. It was a global mourning event.
And his music sales, did they spike?
Dramatically.
Yeah.
He became the best-selling artist of 2009 in the U.S., broke chart records, sold millions and millions of albums and tracks. His legacy, commercially, just exploded again. Sony even signed a $250 million deal for posthumous releases.
And the memorial service, that was huge too, wasn't it?
Absolutely massive. Held at the Staples Center in L.A., televised globally. Estimates put the viewership around 2.5 billion people.
2.5 billion. Incredible. Where was he finally laid to rest?
He was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. It was a private ceremony on September 3rd, 2009. Quite expensive, apparently. The funeral cost around $1 million.
Is it a place fans can visit?
No. His crypt is in the Great Mausoleum there, and it's not accessible to the public. It's kept private.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly recap the absolute key takeaways.
Sure. So, number 1, Michael Jackson's death ruled a homicide caused by acute propofol intoxication.
Administered by his doctor, Conrad Murray.
Right, who was then convicted of involuntary manslaughter. Number 2, the event set off this enormous global reaction, intense media, public grief, a huge surge in his music's popularity, countless tributes.
It really touched every corner of the globe.
It did.
And maybe a final thought for you listening. Consider this really complex mix of things we've talked about. Immense fame, the personal struggles that can come with it, and the huge responsibility of the medical professionals involved with high-profile people.
Yeah.
What does this whole story, this deep dive into Michael Jackson's death, really tell us about those pressures, the vulnerabilities that can exist even with incredible success? And importantly, the ethical duties of those providing care in those situations.
It's definitely something to think about. The intersection of fame, health, and responsibility.
Yeah. Something for you to maybe reflect on further.